The trap is set. The jungle was alive with whispers. Trees stood tall like black giants under the pale light of 2 moons. Every shadow moved. Every sound felt like danger. The hunters knew this was not an ordinary night. Tonight they were not chasing prey. Tonight they were waiting for it. Captain Rin stood near the trap, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He was a man who had hunted for 30 years, but even he looked uneasy. The air itself felt heavy, like something unseen was breathing just beyond the firelight. "Everything is ready," muttered Jero, the youngest of the crew. His voice trembled as he checked the steel net one more time. The net was strong enough to hold a beast twice the size of a man. At least that was the hope. Rin gave a short nod. Hope doesn't save lives. Steel does. And if steel fails, then fire. Around them, the hunters had prepared every weapon they owned. Rifles loaded, shock spears glowing faint blue, and explosives buried under dirt. They had learned the hard way. The creatures of this planet were clever. Too clever. Many men had already vanished into the trees, never to return. The trap was simple. The bait was fresh meat tied in the center clearing. The hunters had used it before. But tonight was different. Tonight they were going after something bigger. Something that had killed 2 full squads in the last month. The fire crackled, but nobody laughed, nobody spoke. Only the insects dared to make noise. "Do you hear that?" whispered Mara, the only woman in the crew. She had scars across her arms, proof of battles survived. The jungle is quiet. They all noticed it now. The buzzing of insects had stopped. The night birds were gone. The silence pressed against their ears like a warning. Rin raised his hand. "Positions. Stay low. Stay ready." The hunters moved into the shadows, hearts beating fast. They hid behind trees and rocks, eyes locked on the trap. The moons gave just enough light to see the clearing. The meat glistened wet, blood dripping onto the soil. Then, snap. A branch cracked far off in the jungle. Too heavy for a bird. Too sharp for the wind. Jero tightened his grip on his rifle. Sweat rolled down his temple. He wanted to whisper, but his throat was dry. Another sound. Leaves crunching. Slow, heavy steps. Something was coming closer. The hunters stayed still, barely breathing. The plan was simple. The beast would come for the bait, step into the hidden circle, and then, boom, the steel net would drop, locking it inside. After that, bullets, spears, fire. Closer. And closer. The sound was almost at the clearing now. Mara's hand shook, but her eyes were sharp. She whispered to herself, "Come on, come on." The meat swayed slightly as if touched by wind. But there was no wind. Then it happened. A shadow slipped into the clearing. The hunters froze. It was smaller than they expected. Too small. The shape stumbled forward, weak like it could barely stand. Then another figure appeared. And another. The trap snapped shut with a violent crash. Steel wires fell from above, sealing the clearing. Dust and leaves flew up as the mechanism roared to life. The hunters leapt from their hiding spots, weapons raised. "Hold your fire," shouted Rin. He was the first to see clearly. Inside the net were no beasts. No fanged monsters. No armored creatures from nightmares. Inside the net were 3 alien girls. They were thin, almost skeletal, their skin pale and marked with strange glowing patterns. Their clothes were torn, their bodies weak. They collapsed to the ground, trembling. And then, something no hunter expected, they cried, not with the growls of a predator, not with the shrieks of an enemy, but with the soft, broken sobs of children. The hunters stood frozen. Guns lowered slowly, confusion spreading across their faces. What is this?" whispered Jero, his voice shaking. "They're not beasts." Mara stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "No, they're girls. Starving, terrified." The alien children clung to each other, eyes wide, tears shining under the moonlight. They spoke in a tongue the hunters didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. "Help us." The jungle around them seemed to grow darker, heavier, as if holding its breath. Rin stared at the net, at the crying children caught in a trap meant for monsters. His stomach tightened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The hunters had come to catch beasts. But tonight they had caught something else entirely, and in that moment, a terrible thought whispered through Rin's mind. If these are not the beasts, then where are the real ones? The unbelievable discovery. For a long moment no one spoke. The hunters simply stood there, frozen, staring at the impossible sight inside the steel net. The jungle wind brushed across their faces, carrying the faint, pitiful cries of the alien girls. Jero was the first to break the silence. His voice cracked like a boy's, not like a trained soldier. "Captain, this is wrong. This is not what we trapped. The youngest girl inside the net lifted her head. Her eyes glowed faint blue, dim like fading stars. Tears streaked across her dirt-stained cheeks. She looked no older than 12 by human standards, but her face carried the weight of something much older. Suffering, fear, and a hunger so deep it made the hunters uneasy. Captain Rin's jaw tightened. He had seen beasts tear men apart. He had seen soldiers scream while fire consumed them. But this broke something inside him. He had not expected pity tonight. Stand back, he ordered, his voice steady but low. Don't lower your guard. Mara's hand hovered near her rifle, but her eyes betrayed something softer. She watched the girls clinging together like fragile birds trapped in a storm. Their bones showed under their skin, their bodies trembling with weakness. One of them coughed, a dry, painful sound. These are not predators, Mara whispered. They're prey. Or bait, muttered Harkin, the oldest of the crew. His face was carved with scars, his voice gravel. Don't let those tears fool you. Maybe something out there sent them. Maybe this is a trick. The hunters shifted uneasily. The idea of a trap within a trap did not feel impossible. On this world, everything hunted. Everything deceived. Why not this too? But then it happened. One of the alien girls raised her trembling hand and pressed it against the steel wires. The hunters flinched, half expecting claws, fangs, venom. But instead their minds were flooded with flashes. Not words. Not sounds. Images. A burning sky. Towers collapsing. Beasts with blades for jaws tearing through crowds. Screams, thousands of them, echoing in their heads. And then the image of the girls themselves running barefoot across black soil, chased by shadows that howled like machines. The vision ended in an instant, leaving the hunters gasping as if someone had stolen the air from their lungs. What was that? Jero stumbled back, his face pale. What did she just do to us? Rin steadied himself, his breathing sharp. Memory. She showed us memory. The youngest girl's lips moved. The words were broken, thick with accent, but they carried meaning. Not enemy, please. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she broke into a sob so raw that even Harkin, stone-hearted Harkin, lowered his rifle. The hunters looked at one another. Suspicion battled with compassion, fear with humanity. The silence grew heavy again, like the jungle itself was watching, waiting for their choice. Then Mara whispered something that chilled them all. If these children are running, then something worse is behind them. As if to answer her words, a sound rolled through the jungle. Low at first like distant thunder. Then louder. A growl that was not from one throat, but many, echoing in layers. The trees trembled, the ground seemed to pulse. The alien girls whimpered, clutching each other tighter. They repeated a single word over and over in their own tongue, rocking back and forth. Rin frowned, listening carefully. He could not understand the language, but one word was clear, even across the gulf of worlds. Hunters. They were saying hunters. The men and women of Rin's crew exchanged nervous looks. Beads of sweat rolled down Jero's forehead. Harkin muttered a curse under his breath. The girls weren't afraid of the humans' weapons. They weren't afraid of the steel net. They were afraid of what was coming. Captain, Mara said, her voice low, her eyes locked on the tree line. We set a trap for the wrong creatures. The growl came again, closer now, vibrating the very air. Branches snapped in the distance. Something huge was moving through the forest, and it was moving fast. Rin's hand tightened around his rifle. His mind raced. If the girls were telling the truth, then they weren't bait, they were refugees. Refugees from something that made even predators flee. The captain's voice cut through the fear, firm and cold. We hold. Do not fire until I say. And keep your eyes open. Whatever is out there, it's not far. The hunters raised their weapons again, this time not for the girls, but for the shadows creeping closer. Inside the net, the alien children cried harder. Their glowing eyes searched the humans desperately, silently begging for protection. And in that moment, Rin felt something shift inside him. For the first time in many hunts, he realized, this was no longer about beasts. This was about survival. And the girls. Then from the dark, 2 red lights appeared. Not eyes, no worse. They were mechanical. Cold. Hungry. And they were watching. The jungle was no longer silent. It was alive with the sound of something hunting. And it wasn't them. Fear versus compassion. The red lights faded back into the trees, but the fear they left behind stayed, thick as smoke. The hunters stood tense, weapons pointed outward, waiting for another sound. Only the cries of the alien girls filled the clearing, their soft sobs strangely louder than the silence of the jungle. Rin kept his rifle raised, his face hard, but inside, his mind spun like a storm. He had led hunts against beasts larger than ships. He had fought in wars where the sky burned red. But he had never stood over starving children, children who did not belong to this world, and wondered if mercy might get his people killed. Jaro's hands trembled on his rifle. He looked young in that moment, not the hardened soldier he pretended to be. "Captain," he whispered, his voice nearly breaking. We can't just leave them in there." Harkin snapped his head around, eyes fierce. "Don't be stupid, boy. This is bait. It stinks of it. You saw what they did in your head. Who's to say they didn't plant that? Could be illusions. Could be a trick to make us weak." "They're children," Mara said sharply. She didn't lower her weapon, but her voice cracked with anger. "Do they look like predators to you?" Harkin spat on the dirt. "On this planet? Everything is predator." The crew fell into tense silence again, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound too loud. Inside the net, the youngest girl pressed her hand against the steel again. This time no images filled their minds, just the quiet touch of fragile fingers against cold iron. She whispered something in her language, the same word over and over. Her sisters joined in, voices weak and broken. Mara tilted her head, listening. "They're begging," she whispered. Jaro's throat tightened. "Begging for what?" Rin's eyes stayed on the tree line, watching shadows move where no wind stirred. "For us," he muttered. "They're begging for us." That single thought split the camp in two. At the argument, the hunters gathered near the fire, weapons still pointed outward. The alien girls sat huddled in the net, their glowing eyes fixed on their captors like lost children staring at strangers. Harkin's voice cut through first, cold and sharp. "We should finish it now. If they're bait, we deny the real beasts their trick. If they're weak, they die quick. Cling. That's mercy enough." Jaro's eyes widened. "You'd kill them? They're kids." "They're not kids," Harkin barked. "They're aliens. You think they cry the way we do because they're innocent? Maybe it's mimicry. Maybe they're learning how to fool us while their masters close in. That glow in their eyes? That's not human. That's not natural." Mara stepped forward, her shadow long against the firelight. "So what? Because they're different, we shoot them? You didn't see the fear in their faces?" "I did. That wasn't fake. That was real." "It doesn't matter if it's real," Harkin growled. "On this world, compassion kills. You soften your heart and you're dead." Jaro's voice shook, but he stood tall. "Maybe compassion is what makes us human." The camp fell silent. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath, as if listening. Rin finally lowered his rifle. His eyes were dark, stormy with conflict. "Enough," he said, and the word carried weight. "We won't decide this with shouting. We wait. We watch. If these girls are bait, the hunters will show themselves. If not," he paused, his voice low. "If not, then we see what they are." The others grumbled but obeyed. Rin's word was law in the field. The telepathic plea. The night dragged heavy, every second stretched thin. The girls didn't sleep. They clung to one another, eyes darting at the shadows, whispering in their strange tongue. Then, without warning, their voices vanished. The youngest girl stared directly at Rin, her glowing eyes wide. She pressed both hands against the net and, again, the hunters' minds filled with visions. But this time it wasn't war. It was hunger. The children, thinner than bones, digging through ash for scraps. Their tiny hands reaching for food that wasn't there. One girl carrying the other on her back through wastelands while fire fell from the sky. And always, the shadows behind them. Red lights, mechanical growls, claws of steel. The images ended, leaving Rin's chest tight, his heart pounding. He tasted ashes on his tongue, though there was no fire near. Jaro stumbled back, choking on emotion. "God, they're starving. They've been running for so long," Harkin cursed under his breath, but his voice lacked its usual fire. The memory had struck even him. Rin closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breath. When he opened them, the youngest girl was still staring at him, her hands trembling against the steel. This time her words were clearer, broken but desperate. "Not enemy. Please, help." The plea was so simple, so human, that it cut through every excuse, every wall they had built. The jungle stirs before anyone could respond. The jungle shifted. It began with a rumble, faint at first like drums beneath the earth. Then the trees swayed though there was no wind. Branches snapped. Leaves fell. The hunters turned as one, weapons raised. Red lights blinked again in the dark. 2, 4, 6, more. Moving slowly, circling the camp. The girls wailed in terror, their glowing eyes flooding with tears. They clung to the steel net as if it was safety, though it was their prison. "Captain?" Mara's voice was tight, her knuckles white on her rifle. They're surrounding us. Rin's eyes scanned the tree line. Shadows moved between trunks, too big, too heavy to be natural beasts. And those red lights, steady, watching, patient, were not eyes of animals. They were machines. Machines built for hunting. The hunter's trap, once their hope, now felt like a coffin. Harkin whispered, his voice trembling for the first time in years. I told you, bait. We're the ones caught now. Jero looked at the children, then back at the glowing red lights. His chest heaved. If we leave them in that net, they'll die first. And then us next. Rin said nothing. His eyes locked with the youngest girl's again. In her gaze he saw no trick, no malice, only raw fear. And trust. Trust in him. The growls grew louder, metallic and layered, shaking the ground. The machines were closing in. The hunters had seconds to act. Rin's crew looked to him, waiting for the order. Fire or flee. Kill or protect. The captain's hand hovered over the release lever of the steel net. His mind raced. If he freed them and it was a trick, his whole crew could die. If he left them, they'd be slaughtered while the hunters circled. The girls cried harder, their voices breaking, begging. The jungle roared with the sound of machines drawing near. Finally, Rin's voice cut through the chaos, steady, unshakable. We don't kill children. Not today. Not ever. With one pull, the steel net hissed and collapsed. The alien girls tumbled out, weak but free. They stared at Rin with wide, glowing eyes, and for the first time, they stopped crying. Mara exhaled, relief flooding her face. Jero nearly collapsed with relief. Even Harkin cursed, but he raised his rifle toward the jungle, ready to fight, because now there was no turning back. The humans had chosen, and the real hunters were coming. The shadows moved, the net fell away with a sharp hiss, and the alien girls stumbled free. Their legs shook under their own weight. Mara rushed forward on instinct, catching the smallest before she hit the ground. The girl weighed almost nothing, her bones too sharp beneath skin stretched thin. Easy, Mara whispered, though the child would never understand the words. Yet the girl looked up, tears trembling in her glowing eyes, and for the first time that night she did not cry. The crew spread out again, circling the fire, rifles and shock spears aimed outward. Rin kept his eyes on the jungle. He knew mercy had a cost. The only question was how high it would be. The jungle was no longer silent. Something vast was moving through it, the breathing darkness. The first sound was the thud of metal feet, muffled but heavy enough to make the soil tremble beneath their boots. Then came the low whir of engines, quiet but constant, like something alive yet mechanical. The alien girls pressed closer to the humans, clinging to Mara's armor and to Jero's sleeve. Their lips moved as they whispered a word again and again, low, terrified, almost a chant. Hunters. The crew finally understood. The beasts of this world were deadly, yes, but these new enemies were not beasts. They were something built. Something designed. Harkin spat in the dirt, though his hands shook. Machines. I knew it. Damn machines. No, Mara whispered, her eyes fixed on the tree line. Not just machines. Look. The shadows shifted. Red eyes, no sensors, flickered in the darkness, moving in pairs. 6 pairs. Then 8. Then more. The numbers grew as the circling continued. They're watching us, Jero breathed. The fire crackled in the center of the clearing, its light too weak to reach far, but enough to paint the edges of their enemies. Shapes stepped between the trees, massive bodies like wolves but plated with armor. Their jaws gleamed with steel, their claws longer than swords. Each movement was too precise, too coordinated. These were not animals. These were predators designed with purpose. The girls wailed, burying their faces against Mara's chest. Captain, Harkin muttered, voice dry as sand. We should run. No, Rin said firm. His eyes never left the shadows. You can't run from hunters. You face them. The circle tightens. The predators didn't charge. They moved slow, deliberate, shrinking the circle tighter around the clearing. The crew turned with them, adjusting their aim but never firing. Shooting too soon would waste precious seconds they might not have. The firelight revealed more details as the hunters crept closer. Their skin was not just metal but fused with flesh. Patches of fur clung to armored plates, like animals carved and reforged. Their teeth dripped with something dark, their growls low and rumbling with mechanical distortion. What the hell are they? Jero whispered. Rin's jaw clenched. Harvesters. That's what they are. The word came from nowhere, unbidden, but it fit. These things were not just predators. They were gatherers of prey. And the girls were their quarry. The youngest child tugged on Rin's sleeve, eyes wide with desperate light. She shook her head rapidly, pointing at the machines and then at herself. She was trying to say something urgent, but her voice broke into sobs. "Captain," Mara said, her voice tight. "They're not after us. They're after them." "Then they'll go through us to get them," Rin replied, and still the circle shrank. The first strike had happened fast. One of the machines broke the rhythm and lunged. The thing crossed the clearing in a single leap, jaws wide, red sensors blazing. Rin fired first. His rifle spat heat and light, blasting the machine's head midair. The creature crashed into the dirt, skidding, sparks hissing from its jaw. It twitched once, then stilled. The clearing erupted. The harvesters roared, their voices a chorus of mechanical growls. The ground shook as they surged forward together. "Fire!" Rin roared. The hunters obeyed. Rifles cracked, shock spears sliced through the dark, and explosions tore dirt into the air. Metal shards flew, sparks showering the jungle. Jero screamed as one machine barreled toward him, claws flashing. He fired wildly, shots bouncing off armor. At the last second, Mara tackled him aside and drove her shock spear straight into the beast's throat. Electricity surged through it, frying circuits. The machine collapsed in a heap, twitching. But more kept coming. Desperation. The crew fought like wolves in a cage. Harkin swung his flamethrower in wide arcs, fire washing over two machines at once. Their fur ignited, filling the night with a stench of burning oil and flesh. But another pounced from behind, slamming him into the ground. He roared, punching his knife into its eye sensor until sparks blinded it. Mara dragged the alien girls behind her, shielding them with her body. Bullets sparked around her as machines lunged, jaws snapping inches from her face. She shoved one back with her spear, teeth gritted, her muscles screaming. Jero fired until his rifle overheated, then grabbed a fallen spear and stabbed at a beast's leg, cutting wires. He was young, afraid, but fighting with fury born from terror. Rin stood at the center, shouting orders, his rifle a storm of fire. Every shot he took was perfect, each one finding joints, weak points, sensors. But even he knew it was not enough. For every machine that fell, two more pushed into the clearing. The revelation then had happened. One of the girls screamed, not in fear but in rage. Her glowing eyes flared brighter, blinding blue. She raised her small hands and a wave of force exploded outward. The nearest three harvesters were hurled back as if struck by invisible fists. They crashed into trees, their armored bodies snapping trunks like sticks. Sparks erupted from their joints. The crew froze for a heartbeat, stunned. She did that," Jero stammered. The girl collapsed into Mara's arms, weak, trembling, her glow fading. She had given everything in one desperate strike. The hunters exchanged looks. Whatever these girls were, they were not helpless. But their enemy was still closing in. The harvesters regrouped, circling again, growls rising like thunder. Their red sensors glowed brighter, locking on the girls. The humans now stood not as predators, not as hunters, but as shields. Rin's voice rang out, iron and unbreakable. "Listen up. These things don't stop until they have their prey. That means they don't stop until they're dead. So we stand. We stand for them." Harkin growled but nodded, lifting his flamethrower. Mara planted her spear. Jero steadied his shaking hands. The alien girls huddled behind them, their glowing eyes fixed on the only shield they had left, humanity. And then as the machines howled and charged again, the hunters roared back. Steel met fire. Flesh met metal, and the night exploded in war. Attack in the dark. The jungle tore itself open. The harvesters surged forward together, a storm of steel and claw. Red sensors cut through the night like burning eyes, and their roars, half mechanical, half bestial, shook the clearing. The hunters did not wait. They met the storm head-on. Fire against metal, hold your line. Rin's voice thundered. Harkin unleashed his flamethrower, a wave of fire screaming across the clearing. Two machines shrieked as their fur and wires ignited, staggering under the blast. But another leapt through the flames, jaws snapping, the stench of burning oil trailing behind it. Mara's spear crackled with electricity as she drove it into the beast's side. The shock lit up its armor like lightning trapped in a cage. It convulsed and collapsed, but Mara had no time to breathe. Another slammed into her, throwing her to the ground. She rolled, mud coating her armor, as steel claws carved the soil where her chest had been. With a scream, she jammed her spear upward into its jaw. Sparks exploded. The beast twitched, then fell heavy beside her. Jero fought like a cornered animal. His rifle overheated within seconds, the barrel glowing red, but he didn't stop. He swung it like a club against one machine's head, shattering a sensor lens. The beast roared, slamming him back against a tree. His breath tore from his lungs. Before it could finish him, the smallest alien girl threw herself forward, her glowing hands pressed against the machine's chest. A flash of blue energy burst outward, just enough to stagger the predator. Mara seized the opening, driving her spear into its neck. Jero collapsed, coughing, staring at the child who had saved him. You, he couldn't even finish the thought. She just looked at him, weak but determined, then stumbled back to her sisters. Chaos unleashed. The clearing was a storm of fire, smoke and sparks. Explosions lit the night as buried charges detonated, tearing apart two more machines. Shards of metal and shredded fur rained down. But for each one that fell, another came. Rin fired shot after shot, each one placed with the precision of a surgeon. He aimed for joints, sensors, exposed wires. He never missed. Yet even he knew they were being overrun. Captain! Mara shouted, struggling to stand as blood dripped down her cheek. There are too many. Rin didn't answer. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it without hesitation, drew his blade, and met the next beast with steel and fury. The creature lunged, jaws snapping. Rin sidestepped, slashing deep into its leg. Sparks flew as it stumbled. He spun, driving the blade into its throat, twisting until circuits snapped. The beast collapsed, twitching. Rin stood over it, chest heaving, face lit by fire. Then we killed too many back, he growled. Breaking point. The alien girls screamed together as another harvester broke through the line. It leapt straight toward them. Mara spun too far away. Jero tried to raise his spear but was too slow. Then, hearken. The old scarred hunter hurled himself into its path. The machine's claws tore into his chest, blood spraying, but he roared through the pain. With his last strength, he shoved the flamethrower nozzle into its mouth and pulled the trigger. Fire exploded from within. The harvester's head burst like a furnace, showering molten shards. Both it and Harkin collapsed in the dirt. Harkin! Mara screamed, but the old hunter only laughed, a gurgling sound thick with blood. Burn, you bastards! Then his eyes closed. The alien girls wailed, their glowing eyes pulsing with sorrow and fury. The youngest reached out with trembling hands, and for a moment the air itself seemed to ripple. The hidden power, a wave of psychic energy burst from the girls, invisible yet crushing. Half the harvesters froze mid-charge. Their red sensors flickered. Circuits sparked inside their armored hides. Several toppled like puppets with their strings cut. The hunters staggered too, their heads pounding, but the machines took the brunt of it. The girls collapsed, drained, their bodies trembling violently. Mara caught the smallest before she hit the ground. Her eyes blazed at the captain. They're fighting with us, she shouted. Do you see it now? They're not bait, they're weapons running from something worse. Rin's heart pounded, not from fear but from grim clarity. Then we keep them alive. At any cost. The darkest moment, but even with the psychic blast, the machines kept coming. 3 remained, stronger than the rest, their armor thicker, their movements sharper. They advanced through fire and smoke, relentless. Rin's crew staggered, exhausted, weapons nearly spent. Mara's spear flickered weakly. Jero's hands bled from gripping broken steel. The ground was littered with sparks, corpses of machines, and Harkin's body still smoldering. One of the alien girls crawled to Rin's side, pulling on his sleeve. Her glowing eyes burned with desperate resolve. She pressed her tiny hand to his chest, and for an instant, he felt her thought, not words, but pure feeling. That we believe in you. Rin's throat tightened. He raised his blade, his voice a roar that shook even the machines. Then believe this. He lifted his rifle one last time, slamming in his final charge pack. Humans don't run. The counterattack. The hunters surged together, a last stand of fury. Mara screamed as she drove her spear into the ground, releasing one final surge of lightning. Blue light arced outward, frying circuits, slowing the predators. Jero, bruised and bloody, hurled himself at one machine, stabbing his spear into the exposed joint of its neck. Sparks blinded him, pain burned his hands, but he held on until it fell. Rin fought the last 2 himself. He ducked under a swipe, blade carving sparks from armored plating. One beast slammed him into the dirt, jaws snapping inches from his face. He shoved back with every ounce of strength, knife straining against steel teeth. Captain! Mara screamed. The alien girls rose together. Their glowing eyes flared like suns. Their voices joined into a piercing cry, and from them a single wave of pure force erupted, stronger than before. The 2 remaining machines were hurled back, crashing into trees with bone-snapping force. One shattered, its circuits exploding. The other twitched, sensors flickering before collapsing in silence. The jungle fell quiet. Aftermath. The clearing was a graveyard, metal husks smoking, flames flickering, blood staining the soil. The stench of oil and death hung thick. The hunters stood trembling, covered in wounds, ash, and exhaustion. Mara clutched the alien girls close, whispering softly though they couldn't understand. Jero collapsed to his knees, staring at the ruins, whispering, We did it. Rin stood tall, his blade dripping with black oil, his face carved with shadow. His eyes scanned the jungle, still burning with fury. This was just the first wave, he said coldly. The alien girls looked up at him, their glowing eyes wide with both fear and fragile hope. One of them spoke in broken words, her voice hoarse, More? Coming. The crew exchanged grim looks. They had survived the night, but the real war had only just begun. And for the first time the alien girls were not prey. They were family. Truth revealed. The fire burned low. Smoke curled upward, vanishing into the canopy of black leaves. The clearing stank of burned oil, blood, and charred metal. The ground was littered with broken husks of harvesters, their jaws locked in death, red sensors fading to dull ash. But the hunters did not cheer. They sat in silence, wounds aching, breaths shallow. Every movement felt heavy, like the jungle itself pressed down on them. Harkin's body lay near the edge of the firelight, his flamethrower still clutched in a lifeless hand. No one dared cover him yet. Not while the shadows of the jungle still whispered. Rin sat on a broken log, blade across his knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. He looked like a statue carved from stone, but his chest rose and fell with sharp, controlled breaths. His crew glanced at him often, waiting for orders that didn't come. Mara tended to the alien girls, her armor streaked with blood and soot. She poured water into a tin cup and held it to the youngest girl's lips. The child drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, then coughed and whispered something weak and broken. Jero sat nearby, rifle across his lap, eyes haunted. They saved us, he muttered. His voice cracked. Without them, we'd be gone. Mara nodded, brushing tangled hair from the child's face. And we saved them. That makes us even. But her eyes betrayed something more, something deeper. Rin finally spoke, his voice like gravel dragged across steel. No, it doesn't make us even. Not yet. We don't even know what we've saved. The first words, the alien girls huddled close, whispering in their strange tongue. Their glowing eyes flickered like fading lanterns. Then the eldest, perhaps 14 in human years, raised her head. She looked at Rin with sharpness beyond her age. Listen, she said. Her accent was thick, her voice cracked, but the word was clear. The hunters froze. Rin leaned forward slightly. You can speak. Learned, she said haltingly, her hand tapping her temple. From you. From minds. From memories. She pointed to each of them, her glowing eyes flickering. Take little, enough to talk. Jero shivered. They've been in our heads. Harkin would have cursed, but Harkin was gone. The absence of his voice was louder than any sound. Then talk, Rin said, his tone sharp but steady. Tell us what those things were. Why they came. The eldest girl shuddered, glancing at her sisters, then back at the hunters. Her lips trembled as she formed the word, harvesters. Harkin's grave still steamed where soil met his scorched flamethrower. Mara sat near the alien girls, her hand resting on the youngest shoulder. Jero crouched by the shattered husks of harvesters, his eyes haunted but restless. And Rin stood apart, staring into the jungle as though daring it to move first that he knew it would. Because predators never stop. The first signs it began with silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence before thunder. Birds that had returned at dawn fell quiet again. The insects vanished. The jungle froze. Then came the tremor, the ground shook in steady pulses, like the heartbeat of something vast. Leaves fell from the canopy. The trees swayed though no wind stirred. The girls whimpered, pressing closer to Mara. Their glowing eyes flared, and the eldest whispered two words that turned every stomach cold. Big ones. Jero swallowed hard. Big ones. As if to answer, the horizon split. From between the trees emerged figures larger than anything they had seen before. Not wolf-sized machines this time. Giants. 10 feet tall, plated in black armor, their jaws serrated like saw blades, their red sensors burning like twin suns. Each carried weapons grafted to their limbs, blades that shimmered, cannons that hissed with steam, and behind them more shapes moved. Dozens. Hundreds. The harvesters had come in force. The last council, the hunters regrouped in the center of the clearing, their faces pale but set. There's no running, Mara said, voice steady. They'll cut us down before we make a mile, Jero muttered, his hands trembling. There's too many. Rin's voice was calm, colder than ice. Then we don't run. We hold. Jero spun on him, eyes wide with panic. Hold? Against that? We'll die. Yes, Rin said simply. But if we run, the girls die too. And after that, every world they touch dies. You want that on your soul? Jaro's jaw clenched, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. He looked at the children huddled together, their faces streaked with ash, their tiny hands clinging to Mara's armor. And he shook his head. No, he whispered. I don't. Good, Rin said, gripping his blade tighter. Then we make our stand here. The preparation they worked quickly, desperately. Jaro stripped weapons from broken machines, rewiring circuits into crude explosives. Mara planted spears into the soil, their tips glowing faint blue. Rin dragged Harkin's flamethrower from the grave and strapped it to his back. The alien girls gathered together, their hands linked, their glowing eyes focused. A faint hum filled the air like the charge of a storm. What are they doing? Jaro asked. Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. Praying. Or powering up. Either way, it's more than we've got. The jungle trembled again. The giants were close. Rin turned to his crew. His eyes, dark and fierce, locked with each of theirs. Listen well. We're not prey. We're not bait. We're hunters. And this is our ground. So we make them bleed for every step. The crew nodded, fear burned away by something harder. Resolve. The battle begins. The first giant crashed into the clearing, its footsteps shattering roots, its jaw dripping with dark fluid. It roared, a sound that shook leaves from branches. Rin fired first. The shot slammed into its joint, sparks flying. The beast stumbled. Mara's spear followed, piercing its throat in a burst of blue light. It collapsed, shaking the ground as it fell, but behind it came 10 more. The clearing became chaos. Explosions lit the air as Jaro's improvised bombs ripped through metal and flesh. Mara fought like fire itself, her spear whirling arcs of lightning. Rin moved with brutal precision, blade and rifle cutting through enemy after enemy, his body dripping with sweat and blood. But the giants kept coming. Point one slammed its clawed arm into Jaro, throwing him across the clearing. He hit the ground hard, ribs cracking. He gasped, blood spraying his lips, but dragged himself up, firing wildly. Another lunged at Mara, knocking her to the dirt. Its blade arm raised high, ready to split her in two, until the eldest alien girl screamed, her eyes blazing white-blue. The beast froze mid-motion, sensors flickering, then collapsed as its circuits fried. The psychic wave spread, staggering others. But the cost was heavy. The girls collapsed again, drained, their glow fading. Mara scrambled to them, shielding their bodies with her own. Stay down. Don't you dare give up. Breaking point hours, or minutes, it was impossible to tell, blurred into blood and fire. The clearing filled with wreckage, with corpses of machines piled high. The hunters were battered, bleeding, exhausted. Rin's arm was sliced open to the bone, his breath ragged, his vision red. Mara's armor was cracked, her hair plastered with blood. Jaro could barely stand, leaning on his rifle like a crutch. And still more came. The last of Jaro's bombs detonated, tearing 3 giants apart. The blast knocked him down, his body still. For a terrible moment, Mara thought he was gone, but then he coughed, rolling onto his side. Alive, but barely. Rin stood over him, blade in hand, blood dripping from every cut. He stared at the final wave of giants pushing into the clearing, dozens of them, their red sensors glowing like an army of demons. This is it, Mara whispered. Rin tightened his grip. His voice was low, steady. Then we give them hell. The final stand. The giants charged. Rin roared, meeting them head-on. His blade slashed deep, his rifle thundered, his flamethrower bathed the jungle in fire. Mara fought at his side, spear crackling, each thrust a burst of lightning. Jaro, broken and bleeding, crawled to Harkin's grave and ripped free the last fuel canister. With a cry, he hurled it into the swarm and fired his last bullet. The explosion lit the sky like a second sun, tearing half the giants apart. The shockwave knocked everyone down. When the smoke cleared, only a handful of harvesters remained. The hunters staggered to their feet. Their weapons were gone, their strength nearly spent. But the alien girls rose too. Their eyes glowed brighter than ever, their hands clasped together. The air vibrated, charged with raw psychic energy. The eldest looked at Rin. Her voice was clear now, pure and strong. Together. Rin nodded once. Together. Humanity's choice. The last battle was not fought with steel alone. The hunters fought with fury, but the girls fought with light. Their psychic storm tore through the harvesters, ripping machines apart from the inside. Circuits burst, armor shattered, claws turned to ash. Rin and Mara cut down the survivors, their cries echoing across the jungle. Jaro, broken but unbowed, drove a broken spear into the last predator's chest. And then silence, real silence. The clearing was a graveyard of fire and metal. The jungle groaned under the weight of death. The hunters collapsed, barely able to stand. The alien girls swayed, their glow fading, but this time not from despair. From release they were safe. For now. Rin staggered to his feet, his body screaming in pain. He looked at the children, then at the sky burning with dawn. His voice was hoarse but steady, carrying across the ruin. Not prey. Not bait. Not ever. He raised his blade high. If they want these children, they'll go through humanity first. The alien girls stared at him with wide, glowing eyes. And for the first time since their world had burned, they smiled. The ending note: the hunters stood together, broken but unbroken. Behind them, the alien girls huddled safe, no longer victims. And somewhere beyond the stars, the harvesters would come again. But when they did, they would not find frightened prey, they would find humanity waiting. Because humans are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced. But humans are the only ones who will look at monsters and say, "Not today."